Hi. Well, welcome. I'm sorry I missed last week's one. We just had a bit of a busy week and I forgot to set an alarm and then I fell asleep. Life happens, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. This week was going to be Amanda, but she is going to reschedule for next week. So thanks, Amanda. We'll look forward to listening to that one. I did, however, that day manage to get a podcast out. I don't know if you have already found my podcast, but it's called Forest Spirituality with Julie Brett. Hello, person that's just joined in. So last week I managed to get a podcast out, and it was the second to last one of the Wheel of the Year observations that I've been making on a little series of those podcasts. I do a lot of interviews and things, but there was one that went out that was about the spring equinox. It was really late because I was just so epically busy in that time of year. But I will do a Beltane one again soon. So if you wanted to have a listen to some of those Wheel of the Year observations, they're all on Forest Spirituality with Julie Brett, that you can get on all the podcast things. So if you're looking for something else to listen to, there's that you can listen to. Hi, Matt. Matt's in the next room. Nice to have you here. Also, if you're looking for more of these videos, you can find them in either looking at the video section of the Druids Down Under Facebook group, or you can find them on the SerpentStar OBOD YouTube channel. So, hi Beck, I'm also in Australia, so hello. I'm in New South Wales in the Blue Mountains, and so hopefully a few more people will come in and say hi. It's going to be a chat about Deity in Druidry tonight. Amanda requested that I talk about this. It's obviously a little bit of a challenging topic because there is actually a lot of diversity in terms of what people believe in Druidry. We don't have orthodoxy. We have perhaps orthopraxy. So we don't we're not told what to believe in Druidry, but we do have shared practice, things that we do that are the same. But not necessarily the way that we understand those is the same. So it's quite an interesting subject to talk about, and there's a possibility that you might completely disagree with what I say, and that just adds to the mix and makes it more interesting. I think that that's one of the beautiful things about Druidry, is that we can actually believe lots of different things in terms of deity or spirits. There does tend to be a sort of common understanding generally amongst people. But some people, can combine other traditions, or they can have a particular way of understanding things. And, when something is said, like even some of our prayers allow for diversity within the words. And sometimes you get that mumbling, jumbling of people saying different things. Like in the Druids prayer, sometimes there's that one line, grant, O Spirit, thy protection. And it could be spirit, it could be God and goddess, it could be just God or goddess, it could be whatever you choose for it to be. But we do get that kind of mumbling that happens at that time, that, people are saying whatever they believe in. So there is even, within the practice, there's room for diversity. So, but that said, how does it work? The other thing was the idea of dogmas and katmas, which I always really liked. The idea that a dogma is something that, like a dog, you can teach it tricks, or it will be, it will sort of behave in expected ways, whereas cats tend to not want to do what you tell them to do. So in Druidry, we tend to have more katmas than dogmas. So there are sort of suggestions and guidelines as to what we might want to do or believe even. But they're not hard and fast. They're not rules based. They're more sort of about personal choice and about experience. through these shared practices. So that might be, meditating with nature, or doing rituals that include the elements and certain stories and mythologies, or celebrating the seasons, or a focus on peace. Like these are our practices, and through working with those we can understand deity in our own ways. So but what are we talking about in deity? So what are the sort of options for people that are maybe new to Druidry and wondering, what do Druids believe? And if you are not new to Druidry and you'd like to contribute in some way as to what your beliefs are about deity, that would be really interesting to have in the comments there. So do feel free to add that either now or later after you've had a think about it. It would be good to have a discussion on that. So individual choice is key, and it's about interpreting it in your own way. But sometimes our rituals are crafted in a way so that people can come together in their diversity to make sense of a ritual in different ways. So I've always liked that three ancestors idea, where we welcome the ancestors of our bloodline, the land, and our inspirations, because even if we're atheist, that could, and you don't like to personify deity, or I haven't met any materialists, people that don't believe in any kind of spirit in Druidry, but I assume there's a possibility that they could be out there. I just haven't had that conversation yet. If you are, have a comment in the comments, and we can talk about it. That'd be interesting. But generally, people in Druidry do sense some kind of spiritual presence in nature, but they might describe it in a number of different ways. So that idea of the three ancestors allows for people to do it in their own way and interpret what that means in their own way, and inviting spirit in the different ways that might mean for them, which works for me. We often also acknowledge Bridget at the east, but some people might just be acknowledging the place of sunrise and beginnings or springtime. So it's a gestural recognition of that direction. And yeah, so let me just look at my notes. So yes, so some of the ways that we might think about deity would include animism. So animism is believing that there's something inherently animated, like some form of spirit or energy that makes the difference between something that's alive and something that's dead. That's not just a beating heart. There's some kind of spirit there, and that could be assigned to something like a river or a tree or a mountain or a valley, or even something more conceptual like love or fertility, or even war. There's deities like war deities. There's deities relating to all kinds of different aspects of life, and sort of having feelings animated, feelings brought into that animistic idea can work as well, or just that anything physical holds some kind of spiritual energy. And I think that's something that quite a lot of Druids will work into their belief system. There's a really great book called The Wakeful World that was written by Emma Restelor, and she is basically trying to take that position of animism, but describe it and make the argument for it in philosophical terms. So if you have a background in philosophy, you might really enjoy reading that one, because it's sort of an argument of what a pagan believes, in her understanding of what pagans believe as animists. And so that's very heavy going. If you don't mind the psychological, the philosophical jargon words, and don't mind getting into that. That's an incredibly interesting book. But yeah, so a lot of people will feel that like crystals have energies, or that plants have energies, or that natural land forms have energies, and I think that could be classified as being animistic. There's also people who are polytheistic, so they believe not just in one deity, like there might be in monotheism, but they believe in multiple deities. So and this might be all the deities from the mythology that we have. There's so many different ones, but some common ones might be Ceridwen or Bridget, the Morrigan or Manannán or the Dagda, like these important characters that in the mythology are sometimes talked about as gods or goddesses, and might have like a petitionary type relationship with these, and some traditions are more petitionary than others, where they want to give offerings and ask for things through prayer and service, and get the blessing of the gods in return. So I would say ADF is much more about that sort of practice, but it does, there's a lot of different beliefs through the whole, all of the different orders. And people are just as much likely to be a polytheist in another tradition. So that's quite common, I think, for a lot of people to think about it that way, and to maybe create altars for specific deities, or to invite those deities to be with them in ritual, or to work with deities maybe through meditation, meeting them in certain ways through visualization, or meditating on receiving something, maybe making an offering and then asking to receive a message or something like that. So that's really common. There's also ways of being atheist or agnostic in Druidry. And that might be me, I think, to some extent. I think that the closest I get to thinking about deity is perhaps the idea of Arwen. So the flowing spirit, the creative force, the energy that has things sort of come into being, is, to me, what I most closely equate with ideas that I had growing up with Christianity. With this idea of God. I never really liked the idea of a personified God, even when I was a Christian, and I still don't particularly like that in some ways. I mean, that's just how it is for me. But when other people are talking about gods or goddesses, to me that's more about these mythological characters from the stories. And to me, I feel that perhaps the way that they were written about in those stories maybe came from a Christian worldview that was trying to understand the stories in terms of the way that the Bible was written. And so that idea of what is a god or a goddess was in some ways projected onto those stories because they were expecting to find it there. Whereas what I think that they are perhaps is much more of this powerful ancestor. They're characters in stories. They had superhuman qualities, but the purpose of that wasn't necessarily that they were sort of deities. It's more in a sense that the story helps us to understand the meaning in a deeper way through that exaggeration of qualities. So to me, I still meet them in meditations. I can still make offerings to them. I could still have an altar or understand those stories in different ways, and it is still incredibly meaningful for me. But I don't necessarily hold tightly to that idea of them being deities. So that is another perspective, and it doesn't create any harm when I go into ritual with people. I can still interpret what's going on in my own way and allow for other people to interpret what's going on in their way, and there doesn't seem to be any difficulty with that. It's actually quite beautiful in a lot of ways, where we end up not really needing to say, well, it must be one way or the other. What we end up doing instead is finding that we become fluent in different ways of talking about our experiences through different lenses of what could be true for us. You know, I can talk about my Druidry in terms of those characters being deity, but it doesn't really change how I believe about them. It just changes sort of the vocabulary that I'm using to explain it. And I think that we've become quite good at that with Druidry, in talking to each other and being open-minded and opening our awareness to the fact that other people might believe things that are different to us, and that's okay. It's quite inclusive in that sense. Barry has asked a question, what is the name of your heaven? Is it the summer country? Yes, I suppose. I think that might be another talk's worth. But yeah, I don't use the word heaven in any sense other than if life is good. Like, you know, it would be heaven to do something lovely today, you know, go down the beach or go to the park or something like that. I don't think of heaven as kind of an afterlife type place necessarily. The summer country is certainly something that is in some of the mythology, and it's not something that I've looked up a great deal, but I'm sure others have, and that would be really, yeah, Summerland, yeah, that's right. The Summerlands even. Trying to think which story it's in, if anybody knows. It's not one that I've read. But yeah, that's definitely worth looking into as well if you want to understand Druidic beliefs about, I guess, the other worlds and things like that. So yeah, looking up the Summerlands is certainly going to be interesting. So yes, what was I saying? So yeah, about this... I think that the nature of it, of deity, is not necessarily something that we can ever describe perfectly in our own language. It's ineffable is one word that's often used to explain the nature of the divine. Ineffable means it can't be spoken. It can only be known. So you can experience the divine, but as soon as you try and put it into words, somehow it's flawed. There'll be misunderstandings and people won't quite understand what you mean. There'll be, it'll never quite live up to the experience when it's put into words. It has to be experienced. And I think that's an important thing to remember when thinking about deity, that we can't understand somebody else's experience and we have to allow for there to be difference. But also I think we can try and experience different things so that we can explain our experiences in different ways to better communicate with each other and allow for that diversity within the tradition. So yes, if you have any other things that you'd like to talk about within this subject, please do leave a comment, which would be great. I should also just put a little disclaimer on the talk that if you ever have interactions with spirits or deities, however you understand them, that are not making you feel good about life, that are perhaps frightening or feel harmful in any way, it's a good idea to talk to a counsellor or somebody that can help you to make sense of those things. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I'll see you next time. Do let me know if you have any thoughts on this. It would be great to hear what you think.